Picture this, September 1980. A cargo ship, a literal fortress of steel, bigger and stronger than the Titanic, is out on the vast Pacific Ocean. One moment it's there, battling a storm, and the next, it's just gone. No SOS, no debris, nothing. Today, we're diving into the incredible and tragic mystery of the MV Derbyshire.
So, let's set the scene. It's the evening of September 9th, 1980. The MV Derbyshire is powering through the Pacific on its way to Japan. It's been at sea for a couple of months, carrying a massive load, 150,000 tons of iron ore. But there's a problem brewing on the horizon, a big one, a storm named Typhoon Orchid, and it's getting stronger by the minute.
And this is the central question, right? How does something this massive just disappear? The Derbyshire wasn't some old rust bucket. It was a modern marvel of engineering, built specifically to take on the world's nastiest seas. So how does a titan like that vanish without a single whisper?
To really get a sense of the scale we're talking about, just look at this comparison. The Derbyshire was longer and taller than the Titanic. We're talking as tall as a 16-story building. And its captain, Geoffrey Underhill, was a seasoned pro who'd sailed through countless storms. Everyone, from the captain to the owners, had every reason to believe this ship could handle whatever Typhoon Orchid threw at it.
That last message on September 9th was completely routine. And after that, nothing, just static. The whole disappearance was so unbelievable that the ship's owners actually waited days to even report it. They just assumed the radio was broken. By the time they finally launched a search, it was far too late. 6 days later, they called it off. They hadn't found a single thing.
The official verdict came down fast, and with no real investigation to back it up, the ship was simply lost to the perils of the sea. Case closed. But for the 44 families who had just lost their loved ones, this wasn't just an unsatisfying answer, it felt like a complete cover-up.
The families just couldn't let it go. How could a state-of-the-art ship, only 4 years old, just fall off the face of the earth? They were convinced there was more to the story, that something crucial was being hidden from them, and they were absolutely determined to find out what it was.
This quote really became their rallying cry. It perfectly sums up what they believed. This wasn't some unavoidable act of nature. They were convinced it was a failure of the system that built the ship, the system that operated it, and now the system that was refusing to even look into why it sank.
Now, a fight like this needs a leader, and that leader emerged from the very heart of the tragedy itself, a grieving father who was just not going to let his son's death be swept under the rug as another statistic.
And this is the man, Peter Redford. He lost his son on the Derbyshire, but he wasn't just any grieving parent. He was uniquely qualified for this battle. As an experienced ship surveyor, he knew ships inside and out. He understood construction, design, and safety better than almost anyone. So he channeled all of his grief and his expertise into one mission: finding the truth.
And what he found was absolutely chilling. He started digging into the Derbyshire's 5 identical sister ships, the Bridge class. He discovered that one of them, the Tyne Bridge, nearly snapped in half in the North Sea. Another, the Kowloon Bridge, broke apart and sank. He found paperwork proving that all of them were developing these dangerous cracks in the exact same spot, and they were being quietly pulled into ports for secret repairs.
Peter eventually uncovered the root of the problem. The shipyard that built these vessels, Swan Hunter, was facing intense competition. To save money and build faster, they had cut corners. They had actually deviated from the original approved blueprints. Key parts of the ship just weren't as strong as they were supposed to be.
So Peter takes this mountain of evidence to the Department of Transportation. He's got proof of a fatal design flaw across an entire class of ships. And unbelievably, they refused to reopen the case. They just said it was closed. That's when the families knew if they wanted answers, they would have to find that ship themselves.
So that's what they did. After years of fundraising, the Derbyshire Families Association, with help from the International Transport Workers Federation, did what the government wouldn't. They launched their own private deep-sea search in 1994, 14 years after the ship vanished.
And against all odds, they found it. In just 23 hours, a remote sub spotted the wreckage of the MV Derbyshire, lying mostly in one piece on the ocean floor, 4 kilometers. That's 2.5 miles down. Finding it was a massive victory, but the real work, the forensic analysis, was just about to begin.
Over the next few years, investigators used submersibles to painstakingly photograph every inch of that wreck. And they discovered it wasn't one single catastrophic event. It was a fatal domino effect, all started by those small cost-cutting flaws. First, a storeroom cover at the bow, which wasn't built to spec, gave way. Water poured in, making the bow heavy and causing it to dip lower. As it dipped, huge waves were able to smash the air vents, flooding more compartments. Finally, with the bow sinking critically low, a monster wave just ripped the cover right off the first cargo hold. And from there, it was all over in a matter of minutes as each hold flooded one after the other.
So in the end, that was the truth. The biggest ship in the British fleet wasn't taken down by some single dramatic structural failure. It was destroyed by a cascade of small problems, a chain reaction started by those minor money-saving changes to the design. It was quite literally death by 1,000 cuts.
The truth was finally out. But, the story doesn't end there on the ocean floor. The fight for the Derbyshire would have a ripple effect that changed the entire maritime industry, making the sea safer for every single sailor that came after.
Because of the evidence these families fought for 20 years to uncover, the whole shipping industry was forced to change. Those tiny flaws that doomed the Derbyshire led to brand new, much stricter international regulations for things like hatch covers, ventilators, and the overall structural strength of these massive ships. You see, before this, some in the industry grimly accepted that losing a few ships a year was just the cost of doing business. The Derbyshire families blew that dangerous mindset wide open and forced everyone to put human lives ahead of the bottom line.
And really, that's the ultimate takeaway here. This relentless 2-decade-long fight by a group of grieving but determined families did so much more than solve a mystery. It exposed a deeply flawed system and created a legacy of safety that is still saving lives to this very day. All because they refused to accept that their loved ones were simply lost to the perils of the sea.